So our speaker today, number one, you didn't want to miss this because he has an Australian accent, which just makes the thing go really well. So everybody likes a good accent. But my good friend, Yoni Kozminski, he is the co-founder of MultiplyMii, which is a brilliant name. To me, that's the ultimate delegate and delegate company. So we love for him to come and talk to us. Him and his team have placed about 2,000 professionals in a bunch of different industries, offshore and onshore. One of the things that's really great about Yoni and his company is that out of the 75 employees, 95% of them are actually offshore. So he's going to give us today the actual human capital playbook, what I call the ultimate human capital playbook. And once he gives us that, he's also going to show us how to accelerate the output of our onshore and offshore teams. So with that, let's welcome Yoni to the stage. Happy to have him.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, guys, thanks for choosing me. I know it's only halfway into day one, but there's a lot of choice, so thanks for taking the time. For me, beyond the accent, I hope you're going to get a lot of value and sort of look at the world a little bit differently in terms of not just offshore, but AI. A bit of content here, but I really wanted to leave quite a bit of breathing room for you guys. So as I'm going through this, take notes if you have questions. I want to give you, I want to give the opportunity to answer any questions to help you think through this as we do. And most importantly, avoid all of the mistakes that I've made in the very expensive tuition that has gone into getting to this point. So Bobby called it out, and my Philippines-based designer created this. 71 of our team that are internal are in the Philippines. It kind of looks like a brain, and I don't know if it was like a Freudian slip or he was trying to sort of create that outcome, but 4 of us sit in Israel, despite the accent, my co-founder and I, and then we have 2 other team members, our head of marketing and BizOps, who's like you guys, American. So I'm gonna go through it. Bobby touched on it. Last year when I did my presentation, I got the whole way through and I had questions in the audience where I was trying to explain, I didn't plant them there, but where can we hire talent, or who can do process, or I'm not trying to brag here or talk about myself. This is about your learning, but it's probably important that I just give you a little bit of the context as to why there's value. So MultiplyMii, as Bobby said, we've onboarded over 2,000 people today. We have more than 300 clients. 90% of them would be here in the US. 70% hadn't actually hired offshore before. So it's really understanding what is that access point and where are you going to build leverage. And then just another little tidbit, 65% of our growth actually comes from existing clients. So once you sort of figure out the secret sauce, organically you start to find ways to implement it across business. And the other sister company we have is Escala, which is process improvement consulting, silly management consulting talk. I've got 20 industrial engineers that are mostly ex-EY and Accenture in the Philippines. We go into businesses, understand and build out process maps, standard operating procedures and things like that. So we've helped to reorg 150 plus companies, tens of thousands of SOPs, and this is honestly a part of why I'm getting so deep into the whole AI and LLM modeling piece of it, is kind of the DNA of the person or the people or the team that you need. A lot of it sits inside of it. I'm looking up there, I realize I can see it down here. So 80% of the companies that we'll typically work with will have a massive shift in what was key person dependency. So with Escala, we work with a lot of companies that are trying to scale and trying to remove, just like all of us, the dependency around either founders or key people, but also for companies who are actually exiting, will come in and document all those processes and increase the valuation, the multiple, the prospective buyer audience, and so on. So last thing about this, one company helps to build the systems, the other one staffs it. So a few more numbers here. I'm not a numbers guy, but we're accountable, even though our team is 75 internally, we are accountable to about 650 and growing about 30 or 40 people every single month on terms of our payroll. So healthcare, social security, HMO, PhilHealth, 13th month, all the legal, compliance, payroll. So even though we are 75 internally, we're now accountable to that, I guess, that large an operation, or having some degree of operational footprint. So the key thing here is that we're still just 4 people that are onshore. I will say we're starting to build our onshore bench. It has to be a really healthy balance between strategic onshore leader and high value leveraged output remotely. We built, again, expensive tuition. Here's one example of it. We built bottom up and built a lot of things wrong. And as we've gotten through this and learned, we've been able to remedy that. So we're doing north of 8 figures inside of 5 years of operation as a totally bootstrapped company. And we grow 20% year on year. And that's even at the size that we're at now. It's actually accelerating. And a lot of that, if you're a math person, the fact that we have more clients and most of people are hiring more people, it sort of accelerates that. So that's going to be enough of just what we do. I just had to throw it in so people understand why I'm talking about the things and where we can help. At a high level, though, for you guys to understand here is that in 2020, you had 42% of companies in the US that were hiring cross-border. So not just the Philippines, but any other geography. In a fairly short time, so we're talking about 5 years on, that number's at 72%. So it's happening. Whether we're getting on that wagon or not, it is something that is going on. And what's more is by 2030, so 4 years on from now, that number's looking at more like 85%. And that equates to 1 billion offshore or remote geographically displaced, however you want to sort of frame it. There's lots of different terms, but that's probably 25 to 35% of the entire global workforce is leading into a position like this. So just quickly, humor me. I know we're sort of on the back end of the day. There's another session, but just show of hands here. Who's actually working with remote talent today? All right, so, I mean, even just looking around, we're probably sitting in that 70 plus 30, so you guys have got the message. I'm excited now to show you a few things, but before I do, for those who aren't there, or for those who aren't taking it seriously, as well as AI that we're gonna get into, wise man JFK had the following to say. He said that there are risks and costs to action, but there are far less than long-range risks of comfortable inaction. So if we're not taking these steps, and we're not accelerating this, our competition is, and it's a very unfair playing field. And I'm going to show you just why that is in a second here. So every objection, if you haven't gone down that path or you're not looking to expand beyond these very baseline VA style, task-based role, which will become redundant if not already with where AI is at, they were right, Do they speak good English? Are they going to be able to work the hours? How does all of this work? Well, those were all really valid in 2015, also in 25, might I add. But it's not the case. So I'm gonna share with you a little bit about the DNA of the Philippines. That's just the geography that I fell in love with for quite a few reasons that I'll share. But it's a population of 120 million people. So it's a third the size of the States. What's more is it's a top 5 English proficiency country. So there's more English speakers in the Philippines than there are in England. For context, they have a graduate level of 500,000+ every single year, and that's being accelerated. It's at a similar rate again to the US. If you look at the 350 or so million people here, I would argue that the degree value has dropped considerably here in the States, but it means a very different thing in the Philippines and in these emerging world countries. And last but not least, so you understand sort of these macro environmental aspects. So BPO, business process outsourcing, is loosely defined as any of these offshore or outsourcing or remote talent. It makes up 8% of the Philippines' GDP, and by the year 2030, they're projecting that to be $60 billion and about 15%. So them as a government, even how we're incorporated there and operate, they want this kind of expansion, and that is just a drop in the ocean at the multi-trillion-dollar industry that is remote talent. So again, I'm not trying to scare anyone here who hasn't got it. I'm just trying to help you understand what the reality of the situation is on the ground and why you should be taking notes. So we've talked a lot at this high, more ethereal, like, what does it all mean? And I've talked a little bit about me. I wanted to do something a little different this year and get a lot more granular. And so I'm going to show you what my marketing team looks like. I'm going to give you exactly what they're accountable for. I'm going to show you their deliverables. You're going to see everything right now, as well as what their salaries are. And couple of important things before I step into this. One, think about it. Think about, as I'm going through this, what would this cost me locally? If I'm working with an agency that's delivering on all of this, or I'm building the internal capabilities, what would it cost me? What would this be worth to me? Because we're going to play a bit of a game at the end of this. I do like a bit of a feedback loop and involvement here. So the last thing I'll say is I've picked just one function that I can talk to in material detail. I built out this function myself. I've handed it over to my head of marketing now, but it's for any function that makes sense that you can find the talent. So, from finance to customer success to B2B SaaS to service companies, et cetera, I think the really important things to consider as I go into this is, one, you need domain expertise. So if you aren't authentic and you don't know how to build out a marketing function, don't try this at home, right? You need to have the capabilities. I've done strategy for Sony and MasterCard, and I've built websites and done SEO, so I know what I'm doing. I'm the strategic layer that sits on shore. What you need to think through is, what are the functions that make sense, and who do I have, whether it's me, someone strategic, whether it's at a VP level or management layer. As long as you have that nous and that understanding, you can build much like I have. So with that all said, I'll show you mine. No one has to show me theirs. First, Will, my UX UI designer, recent father, he handles everything end to end for our brand, for our 3 brands. So our MultiplyMii brand, Escala. He's also responsible for my podcast, Successful Scales. I mean, if you have a look at our website, all the animation work he did, he's delivered on it. So using tools, Webflow, Illustrator, InDesign, Figma, et cetera. And we've worked together for an extended period, over 5 years now. He manages my Webflow developer. So she has deployed 3,200 plus pages now to date. It's a big part of our SEO strategy, and it's going great. Webflow, GitHub, HubSpot, etc. So they're partnering together to produce all of these outputs. Let's move on to, I have another graphic designer, Jamie, who you'll see in a sec. Amazing, does video production work for us as well. So pretty much every piece of video content, she's been responsible for 500 plus, thousands of assets. And then not last but least, because there's more, my SEO strategist. So she's the one who is responsible, Phoebe, for keyword research, understanding where we should be positioning as we've evolved into, I mean, there's like a bit of a fight right now. Is it AEO or GEO, but this new large language model sort of servicing? So they're responsible for all of this stuff. I failed to mention, one of the proudest things that D, our developer, looks at. We're in the 93rd percentile of website speed based on SEMrush's audits globally. So that's competing on the global scale, and these are just some of the stats I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you more of them in a second. We have a content writer, so she's responsible for all the blog content that exists, all the SEO insights that come from our strategist. And I'm sorry if you're not a marketing person and this is over your head or boring. It's going somewhere. And so she's responsible for all of that. I mean, we've had over 1 million website views. This is over the course. I've given just a 5-year time horizon since we effectively moved to Webflow. And then last but not least, B. B is a project manager, but is also quite technical. So we have a BizOps function that handles all of our internal connectivity. She is sort of the marketing arm's HubSpot engineer, if you will. Like, she's very good at email automation workflows. They built a really insane 2,000-point email flow and things like that. So she's making sure that everything's running. So this is just some of the outputs that they've been able to achieve over the last 5 years. So over 1 million views, 500 plus blog posts created, 32,000 or 100,000 would be even more, obviously. 5,000 creative assets. We have now north of 30,000 monthly website hits, and that's growing month on month. Assets, contacts, MQLs, deals. They're actually responsible for north of $10 million in revenue just as a marketing team, and about 35% of now and continuing to grow, but that's from SEO and a lot of the inbound strategic work that we're trying to do. But this team is responsible for that over the last 5 years. There's other channels that are less involved, and I'm not attributing the 65% of growth that comes. I'm just talking about new acquisition. So if you can, I would love everyone to stand up here. We're going to play a bit of a game. The prize one is just a bit of energy, a bit of a reset one. But I don't know how you guys actually do how you do auctions here. In Australia, it's kind of like horse racing, when they're speaking really fast. I'm going to be terrible at this, so I've made you all stand up, so at least we'll get a little bit of fun out of it. But when you hear the number that you think it would be worth or what it would cost, I want you to sit down, okay? We're going to do a reverse auction here. Do I have $75,000 a month? Anyone? 75,000? No takers? All right, let's keep going through. Oh, we got one. All right. 50,000. Do I hear 50? $50,000 a month. Would this be worth $50,000 a month to you? 30? 30,000. Anyone at the $30,000 mark? All right, all right. Getting some movement here. 20,000? Do we see $20,000 a month? How about 15? Anyone still standing at 15? We got 15. We got a few still standing. What about 10? $10,000 a month. 10 grand? All right. Well, I just want to call out, we're talking about 6 dedicated specialists who are all full-time. That entire team cost me $7,500 a month to produce that. And the important thing, again, I'm showing an example, but I am critical to that outcome to getting to that place because I had the experience. And so don't come at the end and say, build me that. That'll go absolutely how you think it will go, terribly. But if you've got someone in your finance function, regardless of the vertical, and the roles exist, that is how you're able to build that leverage. Without the strategic guidance, it comes and it falls apart. And I'm going to talk more about this. I'm going to give you some more insights here. So this is our actual team. That's Will, that's Jamie, that's Will's new child.
How incredible it is to look at all these faces. 6 years ago, this was just an idea where we started as a company with the idea that we wanted to be remote first. Moments like this, where all of us are actually
and that's
in
how
a
I just
physical
dress, by the way.
and we're
That's
not
just
behind a Zoom screen,
like to
looking
show up
and talking to each other, are incredible.
So you're getting a sense, like for us, I mean, I would say one of the surprising, incredible privileges I get is I get to go to the Philippines once or twice a year now and hang out with my team. We build a lot of the cultural components remote, doesn't need that, but I mean, obviously you can see how fun that is. It was tropical themed the year before. If you check out our YouTube, was gangster. We went the American gangster theme, and I'm waiting for this year's to come out in terms of what we're going to wear, and I feel like I always have to lead by example, and not that I can win, but I want to win it. So I hope what you guys are taking away at this point already is you have to stop thinking about offshore as these virtual assistants that are just these people that live on another side of the world, really, and are just delivering. And I'm talking Philippines, but it's everywhere. If you're in Latin America, you're in Eastern Europe, whatever it is, these are people that are on your team, They need to GWC in order to actually be there and have the opportunity, and they want that career progression and opportunity. So you really have to start looking at it as specialist offshore leverage. These aren't, I know I've said it a lot of times, but I don't want to get one of those calls after this. Just build me what you showed me and let's move on. It's specialist leverage. So there is sort of a Pareto principle, or rather a Peter principle, different, where there is a limitation. All right, so offshore, in my assessment, we're looking at 2x in terms of value. We're getting the cost arbitrage, which is obvious. We're talking about full-time salaries ranging from $1,000 to maybe $3,000 at the upper end of it. But it's the freedom that you give your onshore leaders that allow them not to have to step into these really simple outputs that create the real leverage when done correctly. So I'm speaking exclusively about AI at another event virtually tomorrow, and I've done a number of these presentations. I'm trying to keep it simple. I would say this, like, let's see how far we get, and I'm happy to come back to this topic. And I mean, if you're sort of as deep into it as I am, and you're, MCP versus API and how you're building the agentic learning loops around the toolings that you're creating, like, that's for another time, not right now. I wanted to sort of get a baseline. Before I go into this, like, how many people right now are actually a version of AI that they're using to try and further their business? Cool, so everyone's starting to touch on it, great. We're at least here in the right place. And I've intentionally tried to keep this at a comprehension level that everyone can understand without trying to sort of go too far in one way or the other. But 78% of companies, so you guys are really hitting these stats, McKinsey did a study last year, are using AI, but only 6% are actually able to capture real value in it. And so of the hands that went up, do you guys feel like it's really accelerating your output, or it's having a material, like, who feels like they have had sort of this material shift in how they operate? Cool, all right, so still quite a few people, which is great. You're in the 6%, so well done. So I'm going to talk about it conceptually first, and then I'm going to relay it into some use cases for offshore. But the way I'm looking at AI and the significance, or just how seismic a shift this is for all of our businesses and our lives in the future, I think these three things need to be true in order to actually apply it across your business in a meaningful way. So the first and most important, well, each is equally important, but if you get this wrong, the rest of it is useless, is the data layer. So everyone talks about how, AI hallucinates. You went to GPT and you said, what's the weather like in Kansas City? And it gave you something totally wrong. Well, it will do that. And that's not what we're talking about when we talk about sort of the building with AI toolings. The data layer is key. So we had a great conversation about this beforehand with someone in the audience that I was looking at. I realized no one would get that context. But this is where you need to spend time. So you're all sitting on mountains of wealth of value. So what that value looks like is, SOPs, your CRM, transcripts, if your calls are being recorded, if you have customer emails. Think of Xero. Whatever the tooling is, you are sitting on a plethora of data and value that needs to be contextualized. So a lot of the work that first needs to go in to set your onshore team, your offshore team in, is how do you train these large language models to understand that this is a customer, this is the lifetime total value, this is what our closed financial statement actually looks like. Understanding the property and the context. Again, I'm not going to go into MCP versus API, but there's shorter cuts to how you can get there. But without that investment and without actually building that in the right framing, it's not really useful to your team and your offshore team. You need to sort of build those guardrails around how it understands what it's looking at, because we're humans and it's not. The next layer is the intelligence layer. So this is the reasoning engine. So once you have the baseline of all of your information, how do you actually start to access it? So in the world of offshore, as an example, if we're using remote talent, and let's say it's not the Philippines, maybe Pakistan or India or some of these less native-speaking English countries, you can already level the playing field in really simple things. You're able to show them your brand voice. You're able to show the history of emails that you've sent and the way in which your tone should sound, what is on brand versus off brand, and guide them through that process where now you can build these guardrails. So I'm just staying on the thematic of marketing, but if you're putting up social posts, I was literally having this conversation with my head of marketing yesterday, and she was saying, before we rolled these things out, I used to stress out, I used to literally be up all night thinking, are they going to post the right thing? Is the grammar going to be right? Even with AI, and is it going to align with our brand voice and tone? And now we don't even need to think about those things. When it's a customer support response, you're building the context and the parameters. We used to get, sure, we're just going to give you a full refund on someone we placed 2 years ago, whatever it is. You can build the guardrails to not allow your team to make these very costly mistakes, and that's at every layer. Again, this is global, so this isn't just about offshore. This is how I'm thinking about it and how deep I'm going into it. And I'm getting as deep into it not just because we're evolving our consulting practice and are deploying these capabilities, but I have a 600 plus person team. I'm in a people business. If I get this wrong and AI replaces us, well, I'm not in a very good position. And so I'm obsessive about this because it's about how do you turn that into a force multiplier for us, but also for our clients, and really thinking through how do you connect these two things to make them infinitely more valuable. And so the last layer that you really need to think through is what is the outcome? So I think the most overwhelming thing about AI, and when we move away from a dialogue window chatting with GPT, and we're actually building out toolings that have their own agentic learning loops and are actually driving value, it's so expansive. Anything that you can think of, you can create now, and it's where do you actually start? And so getting layer 1 right, and then thinking through layer 2 and how you can hand it off to build that value so that you are not the bottleneck is key. And then that layer of outcome is, the pot at the end of the rainbow here. So an example, I'll just share with you some of the use cases of examples that we've rolled out. But for the consulting practice, it's very custom and bespoke. We're trying to understand business process objectives and problems, but we've done 150 projects. We've got thousands of pieces of collateral. I take a Fireflies recording now, and it's able to produce a beautiful experience that's higher value than when I used to have to go and get 3 of my consultants to assess and make sure that it's aligned. Inside of 30 seconds, it's produced. The next 10 minutes is just auditing that. And it has tracking, and it's a whole different level. Dashboards, we're a HubSpot company. Now we've built our own analytics on top because we can contextualize so much more of the information that we couldn't connect before at ease. But more importantly, I can give it to my team now. They can find things like, who is the most valuable client that I work with and why? Well, just ask, and it's going to tell you what what are the things that I should be thinking through, because it's feeding on all of our overarching data. And so I can level up even the least competent person in my team has now hit a 5 or 10x. They still might need to go on a PIP at some point, but ultimately it's leveling the playing field for my team internally, and really the ones that are rising to the top are those effectively that are understanding how to actually leverage this. So if again, I'm happy to go through examples and talk through this, but essentially what I hope you take from this piece of it is that if you invest in the data layer and you build it correctly, that allows you to give the keys to your team to understand they're not going to break anything. And last but not least, how can they contextualize and use that? Just a couple of caveats on this. I have developers in my team, things like SOC 2 and security risk, and these are all real things that you need to have covered before you start going too crazy here. So just a word of caution if this isn't where you're at now. You're all thinking, great, find me an AI VA, that'll solve all of my problems here. Well, I've had a lot of these conversations lately, and I think one day we might find these kind of unicorn people, but the way I'm looking at it is that there's the vibe coding piece, which I think is sort of the creative use case, but unless you have someone who understands systems and business, you're the strategic layer understanding the problems at a commercial level to solve for, or you have a consultant that's going through that process and you have the securities protocols, it needs to be a team of people at this stage in where we sit. So offshore and AI, the way I'm looking at it, it's at least a 4x, because you're getting higher quality tooling with the tools that exist, and you're also able to deliver at a much faster rate of speed. Now, if anyone here is sitting here and saying, what the hell is he talking about? And have I totally missed the boat here and AI is going to replace all of our jobs? This came out in February, and I was kind of really in my vortex and thought, oh my God, I'm so far behind. How am I ever going to consume enough content and produce enough to get there? So 6.8 billion people have never touched AI, 84% of the population. Those that have used a free chatbot and interacted, so that might even be everyone here who hasn't, or anyone here that hasn't rather, if you've engaged with one, you're already in a 16th percentile. If you're paying just $20 a month for even, I would say, sort of the entry point, the gateway to all of this, and you're using GPT or Gemini or Perplexity or Manus and on and on and on, you're already in a 0.3 percentile of the world, so you're good, right? You're not sitting here and you shouldn't be freaking out. And I'd say like what I'm talking about here and where I'm pushing is in this 0.04%. It's actually the building of the toolings and the railings to accelerate everything. So I saw this in February and had a big breath of fresh air. Not that it's stopped me from spending 15 hours a day on this stuff, but it's a vortex in itself. But we're all going to be fine. I think the important takeaway here for you guys is that AI will not replace you, but someone using it will. I think this is loosely credited to Sam Altman, OpenAI, GPT. It's how you can evolve and put this in your business and give these opportunities to your team. Just a couple of tidbits here. Like I said to my team 3 months ago, whatever you want to spend on AI-related tooling, like just ask. It's an infinite budget, because if I can find the people who want to use it, we do once a week vibe coding sessions. We have a competition once a month. Whoever builds the best tool that adds the most value, we're paying them. So I'm forcing this down their throat because this is what I'm trying to create. I'm trying to create my team who are thinking this way. I realize there's probably more of this than I had given myself credit for, so I'm going to maybe accelerate a bit because I want to give at least 20 minutes for questions. But how does it all come together? So most companies, when they're going through offshore, even ones that are doing it today, which most of you are, I think these are the key areas that I typically see where things don't work or don't work to the level that they would like. The first is, and it's exciting obviously, we didn't see Artemis make it to the moon and back without having a mission director and someone sat in that seat. And so I talked about it at length, but just to hit the proverbial nail in the coffin here, you need to have strategic insights on the ground in whatever function that is, and you need to find the right geographies. So I know the things that work really well for the Philippines. I know the things that other geographies will do better. And I think that is the balance, is having that person who can guide it, having an internal champion to deliver and understand what are they looking to achieve is going to be number one on my list. Number two, you get what you pay for. So, it's a funny thing. I mean, there's a platform called onlinejobs.ph. Anyone here heard of it? Yes? No? Yeah? I like to call that the gateway drug to the Philippines. It's like you find talent that's kind of like good enough just to get some basic sort of administrative tasks off, but we're talking the difference of a couple $100 a month in getting someone who is exceptional versus someone who is mediocre at best. And so it's really looking at the angling here of, I want the best that I can get because I'm looking at the force multiplier for the business. And we've got salary guides and we've got this a whole lot of toolings and things that will give you guys insights around what it costs. But you're typically looking all in at between sort of $1,200 and $3,500. So think about what the comparative is for business value and onshore, and it becomes a pretty a no-brainer. And then last but not least here in terms of mistakes is you're not jumping out of a plane without a parachute. Why would you hire someone without some form of SOP or onboarding? I think the big reality here, and I've actually wrestled with this for a while. When you have onshore, you can turn over your shoulder and you can say, hey, like, come and follow me, or, just shadow what I'm doing, look at what I'm up to. But what you take for granted is just how much time and energy and efficiency that sucks from you actually delivering on the things you need to. So I think it's exactly the same for onshore, but when they're halfway across the world and time zones don't always line up and things like that, I think having standard operating procedures and being ready to accelerate that outcome is really key. So how do you guys begin? I've obviously thrown a lot of information, but if I'm in your position, what am I doing? I think the first thing that I'm looking to do is really think through your team. What are the best people in your team doing, and what are the things that if they had a bit of relief, how far could they push it? What are the things that they could actually be working on that adds more value? What would 20 extra hours a week for you, for your VPs, for your senior leadership actually do in terms of moving the needle, and whatever that means to you? And last but not least, how would your function or company run if everyone had this level of support? You know, it's not just one dimensional and it's just marketing or it's just finance or it's just customer support. It might not be everywhere, but it is in most places. I would comfortably say you're going to be able to affect 80% of it. And so really thinking through what does that look like? I talk about it at the very end, but at the same time, don't go and hire 10 people at once right now just because I've said all of this. Like, you know, enter it in a intentional way and have a single threaded leader in each function. Hire the first person, see how that goes, move on to get it right. It's not about rushing. It's about, like I said, we've got a time horizon that doesn't close tomorrow, but we have such an unfair advantage if we're handling it today. And so the questions point to who, but the challenge is how. So we have built on a lot of our knowledge. This is sort of let's call it the first layer for us. We have a guide where you can go through a questionnaire wizard. Really struggling with that. You guys understand Australian English, right? It's landing, yeah, cool. Essentially, this will give you an insight. So you can scan this QR code. It'll come up again. It's at our booth as well, but you can go through and just answer the series of questions, and it will put forth some insights in the roles that you should be considering related to specific functions and where leverage can build. We go a lot deeper. So we have a product called Offshore IQ where we'll actually interview, shadow review, understand operationally what happens inside of the business and give you a much more in-depth insight into where that opportunity is. You'll see all the insights around that if you go through that wizard. Do it after, or maybe in a little bit, because I want to give you just a few more things before we switch to question time. Talked a lot about offshore. I think some of the things that have been apparent to me, and the data supports it, is where sadly our onshore counterparts are heading. So in the US, you have 32% employee engagement rates today. That number is like drastically down. And this is post the Great Resignation, I think it was called, in a post-COVID reality. 66% of these people who probably aren't working even that hard are feeling burnt out. Woe is me. I'm not sympathetic to it because I look at how hard my team produce, and there's no, it's the opposite. It's how do I make sure that they're not burning themselves out, inverted? And then last but not least, 51% are actively seeking new roles. And so when you put these things together, and this is really sort of the last thing that I want to share with you about Filipino culture that I think is something that over the course of the last 10 years has become more and more apparent to me, is, and this is the team again, one, for many of them, this will be the first college education that someone has had in their family. So the family would have saved up to put them through college for them to create not just a better life for themselves, but for all of them. So they become typically the breadwinner of the family. And what that means is a few things. One, their earning power is typically 5x. When I started the company, I interviewed 2 of my former team members in an e-commerce business that got acquired. And I asked, what was your highest salary before you were working with us? And it was about $2 or $3 less than we were paying without benefits. And I said, why would you have taken that sacrifice? And I said, well, I didn't know. We were doing $1 million in profit. It was a rounding error for us, and I just didn't have that knowledge, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And so when I started the company, that was a really important sort of cornerstone, is that we're going to pay fair market rates. We're not going to pay them triple because that erodes the value that we're trying to create. But what it means from a cultural lens is that stickiness, so retention, is up. They are, as long as you're providing a material pathway for them, they are going to be with you long term. What's more is that, again, stability over some other geographies, not just locally, but for a few extra bucks, they're just going to leave because it's a very short-sighted way of looking. And again, these are just some of the things that I liked about the Philippines. So what becomes of this is you have this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You give better opportunities to people who are being paid fairly. What results is you attract better talent. What's more is that they perform better, the outputs become better, there is growth that you reap the benefits for, and then it's reinvested. And I'm saying this from experience because 25 of my 71 team members today have been with me for more than 5 years, and we've been around for 6.5 for context. So as long as you're building the pathway for them, I have not seen this, and maybe I'm a little biased because I came from agency land, and I think even when I was living in Los Angeles, the average tenure is about, I think, 16 months is sort of like the average turnover rate for that style of work. But this is something like really new to me to see this kind of stickiness, and it shows from our parties. The last thing I'll share, I mean, I can't even remember, we went through it a few times, Bobby, but I shared that I live in Israel. So I've been living inside of a war zone through this period. To get here was a legitimate mission. I had to drive, because there were no flights in and out of Tel Aviv. I had to drive to Egypt, get across the border with my family, fly. And I did that because I was scared that I wouldn't be able to get a flight here. So we went over to the UK, and then I came through. And I'm not looking for sympathy. I actually have my perspective on this is, which kind of sounds a little bit weird now that I'm about to say it out loud, but I'm grateful for it. And it's only because of the perspective that it builds. Like this, to be here is like such a privilege for me, given all of that. And what I'm really trying to call out here is that the business grew while I was through this period of, intense disruptions and 10, 15 times a day going to the bomb shelter. Like, the business grew, it didn't shrink. And so when you're building that leverage, it's material. So Monday morning, because obviously, I should never forget to tell all of you, we are doing wine tasting at booth 26, so you're not gonna wanna miss that. But obviously, like I said, for later, because we're gonna have a few drinks, so let's get to Monday or maybe Tuesday, run that assessment with your team, give it round, see what actually turns up, and we have a salary guide, and come and chat with us, and we'd be happy to sort of give you a lot more depth in it. But pick max one role in a function if you haven't, whether it's with us or your current provider or you're doing it yourself, whatever it is. I'm saying, I hope that what you take away from this is just thinking about how you can turn this into a whole lot more value. So, I mean, we've got some good time left here, so yeah, would love to field some questions. Thank you.
I got a microphone here.
Thank you for the presentation. One of my questions, we're in real estate, and one of the things we've found challenging, we have 13 global employees across Latin America and Philippines, is the specialization in real estate. And so even just like an accountant and not necessarily having real estate accounting background, whereas marketing is kind of applicable to all businesses. So just curious how you help your clients think about structuring roles when they are a little bit more industry specific.
So, did everyone hear that? Like, everyone could hear that? Yeah, cool. It's just quieter for me, so I didn't know if I had to repeat the question. So, great, you all heard it. I think there's a few layers to this. The first layer is that understanding if that specialized talent does or does not exist. Like, for us internally, I've got 11 full-time recruiters. Most of the work that we do is passive candidates headhunting as opposed to reactive. So I would stress test that talent doesn't exist at that level. I know we work with companies not too dissimilar. But when we're talking about sort of that higher level structure, and for this specifically, we look at it from a lens of where is that leverage built firstly, and then what is the lowest common denominator skill set. So if you're sort of doing the back of the napkin approach to this, it would be, what are the key accountabilities that we know would be in scope for that individual, and that they have an outsized chance of succeeding in, and sort of working backwards from that, and then going down the promotion route. So, we're talking about, do you want to just share a little bit more of that role, or one of the specifics in it? Amazing. Yep. So if anyone didn't hear that, they're seeing success. I didn't catch your name, but you're seeing success effectively in having individuals closing the books or handling certain aspects, but not the full cycle piece of it. I would say it came up actually yesterday in a conversation. We see the most success when you're trying to look for those I don't want to call them like full stack, but let's say having that experience to find that person and bring them in versus sometimes elevating them, because I'm just talking about the Philippines right now, every geography is different, but sometimes there can be a management gap. So having that management experience of team members, I think, is going to set you up for greater success. And then breaking down, like our internal finance function, we've got a CFO that sits onshore, and then we have a financial controller that's in the Philippines that has extensive management experience. And inside of her team, we have AR, AP, a full-time CPA accountant that is the one who is closing our books each month. And so sort of building it, like, I wouldn't go beyond sort of financial controller, but yeah, I hope that's answering the question. Cool. No, there is. Everyone's being too polite here.
So we have a team in the Philippines, and I have a couple of questions. Are you hiring direct, or are you using an employer of record? And with the Philippines, how do you navigate the extensive list of government holidays as well as outages due to weather and natural disaster?
Yeah, I love this question. I love how all of a sudden, a couple times a year, everyone is a devout Muslim, and you get those kind of holidays. And then the other is the rolling surprise holidays that they'll spring on you a couple of times. The first part of the question is, do we use an EOR, an employer of record? We are incorporated, so we are our own employer of record. I would definitely recommend going down. It's a little bit of a hairy one for a couple of reasons. Like, one, employer of record, you're paying the benefits yourself. You're actually, you're really looking out for the employee or your team member, more importantly. I don't use that term personally, but the delta sometimes is there'll be talent that doesn't want to take on those benefits because they have to do it legitimately. And I mean, no one likes paying tax, but Filipinos can be very opposed to it. So it's finding that balance of sort of, there's loopholes around contract management versus EOR. I'm getting a bit technical, but I imagine this would make sense to you. So the stickiness is definitely in the EOR piece of it. And I think you get better talent that are in that system, though you can find it through contract management, but you just need to navigate sort of the very, murky, legal aspects of contractor versus employee-employer relationship. So I hope that's giving you a bit of insight. And then on the surprise holidays piece of it, look, we have them decide ahead of schedule. So it's a little bit different. Like, if you're working with team members and it's not under employer of record, you're going to have more flexibility. There's pros and cons to each, but that you're going to have to follow typically the Philippines calendar. So you have a little bit less flexibility unless you can write that into a contract and be very clear about it. We typically will have them align. You're either taking the Philippines holidays or you're taking the US holidays. And we're going to align on those commitments and build that into the sort of the relationship and the contract management. So that's one way that we typically look to sort of mitigate an issue like that. But I would say, like, sometimes there's these surprise ones that get thrown up and we'll just, let them have it. I think also us as an internal employer, so this isn't necessarily for all of our clients that we work with, like, we give 24 annual leave days a year. There's, coming back to the cultural challenges, ironically, in the Philippines, is that a lot of them would rather just take money instead of leave days, and I don't see that as a healthy outcome. So we extend the leave days and we don't do cash conversion for days worked, which is common practice in the Philippines, is that a lot of corporates will do that, and you're just going to burn your team out, and you're not going to get the results like we do with the 25 plus now that are 5 years in. So, yeah.
Do you see a lot of downtime because of earthquakes or weather-related issues?
No. The short of it is no. We have had a little bit. Like, I would say there was like a period of time where, like in Cebu, actually, where we were, like just before there was an earthquake and then there was a typhoon. But it's like, if you're getting people that are, like, our major bases are Manila, Davao, and Cebu. And when you get to more rural areas, I think you might experience a little bit more of that. There's definitely ways to combat it too. Like, I mean, Starlink's being rolled out, which is great. And I would say if you've got employees that are sort of further out, you can get generators and things like that. But at a personal level, it's never really been a particular issue for us, though that was something that I was always concerned of. I think once you sort of hit a certain threshold of professionalism and career progression, and I'm in the right room here, like everyone's building their quarterly rocks and they're thinking through their 1-year plan, their 3-year target, their 10-year picture. No one's walking into this and saying, well, how am I going to figure it out? So I think when you sort of frame it in that way, you'll attract the right talent. They understand the clarity of where they're going, and it works. No worries.
Thanks, Yoni. That was a great presentation, and I really appreciate how you're innovating your people business, and we're doing the same at Authentic. I also appreciate how you validate the importance of the strategic role to orchestrate all of that. My question for you, as another leader who is bringing the team along on, being in the very small percentage of companies further along in their use of AI, how are you setting expectations or leading the team forward? You talked about some contests for innovation, and you talked about a full budget to support exploration, but I've noticed culturally that some people are natural, they just lean into any new learning opportunity, and others you need to kind of pull along. So how are you bringing the organization along? Are you kind of taking up the mantle that you need to learn it first and then roll it through the company? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. I think it breaks into a few different components. I mean, one, just as a character type for me, I feel it challenging to give strategic guidance to the company unless I have a level of depth of understanding. I've probably gone a little bit too far in where I'm at, but it's just once you sort of see it, you can't unsee what's possible. And yeah, like even as a people business, counter to what you guys may or may not think, like I'm not trying to sell people, we're trying to build solutions, and I would prefer not to hire more people if I don't need them. I think the shift happens there. So in terms of your question around how are we bringing people along, I think a couple of things are happening organically. I called out what Sam Altman had to say. AI is not going to replace us, people using it will. And so there's one just natural, the cream is rising to the top. I'm seeing who the people are that are adopting it, and pretty quickly they're able to do the work of 2 or 3 people realistically in time. And so they become an indispensable value proposition to me as a leader in a business. And that's one component. The other piece, which I'm still trying to figure out, to get not super technical, but like when you're using Claude Code, for example, there's a different, the 200 max plan or the $20 plans. And when you're getting those plans, you don't actually get to see everyone's individualized token use. Whereas if you build it in a certain way, you can actually see and build dashboards to get those insights. So I'm moving toward optimizing for visibility even over price, because if I can see who's using what they're doing and the value they're creating, then that's sort of another layer of visibility that I'm going to get to see who's actually accelerating the growth. So I think like it's that combination right now between the competitions where, we're talking about paying someone more than 50% of their salary as the bonus for the winner each month. It's easy when the average salary is about $1,000, right? So it's not crazy for us, but the outsized value of that sharing piece, of seeing how to do it, and then the ones that are actually creating value for the business, it's free. So I think that's the layers. I'm trying to figure it out too. I don't have like the truth is like, I think in general, anyone who tells you they've got all the answers is someone to be cautious of. But like everyone else, I'm really trying to wade my way through this and see what's going to stick and how far can I push it. I think most people will be some form of leadership in their business here, and it's like you're always frustrated that you want them to be where you are 2 weeks ago, but I'm trying to just sort of like understand that you have an outsized advantage because you're looking at the overarching commercials and how you have much more knowledge. And again, I have way more offshore team members than, or at least from a percentage of my team. And so there's a degree of limitation there as well. If I have more, like if I'm in a position where I've got more strategic leaders, I can probably push faster, quicker.
Maybe time for one more question.
I see five minutes here, so whatever,
Okay.
as in like whatever.
Yep, just leave me one.
Yeah.
We currently have 3 team in the Philippines, and we have a struggle with how to handle the security, of our information going back and forth, our financial information going back and forth, our clients' information. Is there a better way to handle that without really slowing down the speed and latency?
I'd probably need to dig pretty deep into like what is your company, what are the things that are sensitive versus not, and how you're even like with your 3 team members.
Want to know?
Yeah, are they using their own computers? Are you help me understand sort of your setup a little better?
Yeah, we actually have them on 3 different platforms, so 3 different employers or 3 different agencies using their own equipment. I think 2 of them, the agency provides the equipment, so they have they're able to view their screens and see what they're doing every 15 minutes and all those kind of things.
But that's like a screen capture, like a hub staff type solution. Yep.
But we're sending financial data, back and forth, and our clients' financial data. And I don't know, is there a gold standard for the security?
Yes. Yeah, there is. And this is more on the technicals. I'm happy to talk to you about it. It's actually something that we're starting to, because of the size of client that we're starting to deal with and the work that we're doing, where we're looking to bring a bit more of this in-house as a capability. But the short answer is there's a couple of different pathways, but one is leveraging a remote environment like an Azure is already going to have a much higher spec protection layer. So you build a virtual machine for them, you install all of the content, they're able to spin that up on their desktop. So if you want at any point, you can kill it. They can't actually extract the data. They can't, you're controlling what they can put in. And then when you start to get to things like SOC 2 compliance, where you can't physically even put a USB in to take data off it. So I'd say that's like the first, that's a directive in what I would define as gold standard, but that's baseline. It can go a lot further than that too. All right. Well, if there's no more bets, I think you guys get a couple minutes back to yourselves. So thank you.
All right.